In this lesson, we'll add one more test for the user form in registration mode, and the new test will verify that the user sees a different piece of text if they do not provide matching passwords. So as a reminder, that logic is written in our form handler submission method right here, and here is what they see if the passwords do not match. They see a string that says passwords do not match. Now, once again, as a reminder, we don't really care about testing component state. However, if that component state affects the visual display, or in other words, what the user sees and interacts with in the browser, then it is important to test. Our user form has many branches of logic, many different pathways of execution. There's different paths that the code can take. And it's important that our tests not just cover the happy path or the successful path, but any branch of logic that the code could run through. There is no test that we currently have that is running through this else statement. So we have not covered this logic in a test, and it is important to cover all of our bases. With that said, the good news is our test will be very similar to the one that we wrote in the previous lesson. The only thing that we have to alter is our confirm password field should now have a different value than our password field, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter which one we modify as long as they are not equal. Otherwise, the process remains the same. Render the component, click the toggle to get the app component into registration mode, fill out the email, click the button, etc. So I'm going to add another test, and remember, we have a describe function right here for the context of the user being in registration mode. That is still the scenario under which I want to operate, right? We're still testing when the user is in registration mode, so I want to add our new test within this function, but below the test that we wrote in the previous lesson. We can have as many it function calls within our describe function as we want, and they'll all be nested in our output. So if I scroll down here, I believe right here is where our function ends, our original it function. So right here, I'm going to add another one after a line break, and I'm going to say it alerts user to password mismatch. And in fact, even that can provide or use a little bit of clarity, because it almost makes it seem like it does both of these things. When the user is in registration mode, it registers account for user and alerts them, and it alerts user to password mismatch. Doesn't really make sense. So I think there's an additional piece of context that we can provide, and the way we can do that, of course, is providing another describe block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another describe nested within this one. I'm going to say describe when user does not provide matching passwords. I'm going to provide my arrow function as the second argument, and then I'm going to cut and paste this it function call within here. All right, so now we're going to have many different describe blocks, and thus you can see the nested output here. We can see we begin with app, which is our topmost describe, then when the user is in registration mode, and then when user does not provide matching passwords. So you can see how that nesting creates almost like a story. We can see all of the different pathways that the component can take, and then understand what exactly we're testing, which really means what is the value to the user. The component does different things depending on the scenario, and I think with this structure of nested describe function calls, we have communicated to our readers what is going on. So it alerts user to password mismatch. Perfect. So now what I want to do is copy most of the text above. So I'm going to scroll up here and copy everything I have here and paste it down here. So once again, very quickly walking through, we are rendering our app component. We are finding the element on screen with a role of switch, and that is actually coming from a input with a role of switch that is created by the switch component that we got from the React Switch library. Then we are clicking on it to get the form into registration mode. Then we are providing a value for the email input after we find it. Then we locate the password input and provide a password of Star Wars. And here is where we locate our confirmed password input. So obviously what I want to do here is provide something totally different. So maybe I'll provide an arbitrary string of donuts. Okay, then we're going to click the submit button to register the user. The text should still be registered because we are in registration mode. But now our success message is not going to be this one. In fact, I would even say it's not even a success message, it's an error message. So I'm going to change this to be error message. And here the text we're going to be looking for that the test should verify for us is passwords do not match. All right, notice here we are using a period, so I'm going to make sure to write a period here as well. I don't even think the period is necessary because we should be able to just search for this as well, but I'm just going to be explicit and add the period as well. Save that, and you can see our test passes. So we have every single pathway covered. We have validation that when the user is in login mode, they see this message, assuming they provide a valid email and password. And then in registration mode, we are testing for a scenario where the user does give me matching passwords and when they do not. Now, of course, there's many other additional checks that we can add for this user form if we were emulating a real scenario, right? Maybe the email doesn't exist on the backend server, right? Or maybe the email that they're trying to register with already exists and can't be registered with, right? But as it stands, because our test suite is covering everything we have in our implementation, all of this logic is handled, right? We are rendering the component, we are interacting with it, we are filling out our inputs. I think the collection of tests we have now is sufficient to verify that our app component is working as expected. We're really covering just about every case that we could cover if we were to open our app in our browser and interact with it as regular users, right? So with that said, this is going to conclude our initial testing section. So hopefully you've had fun introducing yourself to React testing library. But what's going to be super cool is in the next section of the course, we're going to introduce React hooks. We're going to refactor our app component to utilize this new feature of React. And then we're going to observe how our original tests will still work. And that is going to validate the central premise of React Testing Library, that because we are not worried about component implementation details, but are rather testing the behavior, our tests should stay the same despite the fact that our implementation is going to radically change in the next section to utilize totally different React features. And that is a good sign, right? Because that means our tests are resilient because they are testing what is important rather than getting obsessed over implementation details that are likely to change and then get the tests to fail. All right, we're going to see that story unfold over many sections. That's what makes it a lot of fun to teach to you. All right, that's all there is to cover in this lesson. So I will see you in the next one.